Canada's far north is a vast and remote expanse. A starkly beautiful land. These traditional stone figures, Inukshuk, have become a symbol of the region. It's one of the few relatively untouched places left on the globe, with a sparse population but enormous riches.
It's difficult to explain. There is something special, something emotional and sentimental about the Arctic for Canadians.
There's something about the ethos about the Arctic that has always fired our imaginations.
It's a lovely, lovely, majestic place. Yeah, it's beautiful. It just remains constantly beautiful.
It's summer, and here in the southern Arctic the ice has melted, though there's still snow on the distant mountains. For just a few months, towns like Iqaluit on Baffin Island, the capital of the territory of Nunavut, are accessible by sea.
And now, CKIQ News headlines. It's 7 degrees in Rankin Inlet and 9 degrees in Iqaluit at 8 a.m. I'm Kent Driscoll with your CKIQ News.
But there is renewed interest in the Arctic and its buried treasure, which includes potentially huge reserves of oil and gas. To protect it, these clear skies and pristine waters are experiencing something of an invasion.
Integrated as never before, our Canadian forces are better suited to meet the current defense needs of our country and this continent. A more relevant force in the new international security environment.
Historically, the Canadian military has focused its patrols on the Pacific Ocean to the west and the Atlantic to the east. It has all but ignored the Arctic. Now it's also flexing its muscles here.
Joint Task Force North, ready to protect and defend Canadians at home.
We used to call Canada coast to coast. Now we call coast to coast to coast because we are really looking at 3 oceans. It is going to be a 3-ocean Navy, certainly for most of the part of the year.
"700 Army, Navy and Air Force personnel, plus a special unit of Inuit Rangers, are taking part in this 10-day, $3 million exercise. Operation Nanook, the native word for polar bear, is part of a series of initiatives aimed at sending a message about Canada's sovereignty in the north.
Canada's new government understands the first principle of Arctic sovereignty: use it or lose it.
The Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper, who campaigned for election on a platform of protecting the north, is aware of the potential economic threat from the Russians, the Europeans and even the Americans. During a 3-day visit to the region, he announces the construction of several polar-class patrol ships and a deep-water port in the Arctic.
The Arctic archipelago is an integral, indivisible part of the true North strong and free, and that we will not compromise the defence or the sovereignty of Canadian territory.
About 6,000 people live in Iqaluit and they welcome the troops. They know that their land and their way of life need protecting. The Canadian Rangers in their brightly coloured sweatshirts are part-time reservists who patrol Canada's most remote regions. Sam Omick joined 20 years ago.
The Rangers are the most unique people that I've ever met. They bring to us knowledge of the wildlife, knowledge of hunting, of fishing, of how to sustain yourself. What they provide us is the ability to live in the north.
This is what the far north looks like for most of the year. A magnificent but brutal frozen land, accessible only by powerful icebreakers. But local knowledge and science agree. The Arctic is not what it used to be.
The Arctic, first of all, is so misunderstood or not well understood for its majestic energy. But really, even in geopolitical terms, its global significance.
And you are seeing it change?
Oh yes, very much so, yeah.
For the first 10 years of her life, noted environmentalist Sheila Watt-Cloutier travelled by dog sled. Now she's watching her fragile backyard change at a rapid pace.
With our hunters on the land and the rangers on the land, we become the sentinels. We become the first line of defense, the guard, so to speak, for the rest of the world. As we protect our way of life, we protect it for the planet.
One of the biggest challenges that the Canadian military is facing is the fact that the Arctic is a very difficult environment.
Political scientist Dr. Prof Huebert has been invited by the military to observe this week's exercises.
To engage in any long-term. The Arctic is warming, and with that warming is coming both the reality and perception of accessibility. So as a result, we see all the Arctic nations, we see major industrial corporations now waking up to the fact that there is going to be tremendous economic opportunity within the Arctic.
One of those opportunities involves an international shipping route through the Northwest Passage. The Northwest Passage connects the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans across northern Canada, but up until now it's been mostly blocked by ice, even in summer. But the latest satellite images show that the passage is fully clear of ice for the first time since monitoring began in 1978. The areas coloured dark grey are ice-free, and these animations from the European Space Agency show the extent of the changes, just in the past few years. If the ice melt continues, shipping times between Europe and Asia could be dramatically shortened. But there's already a fight over the legal status of the Northwest Passage.
Canada considers all of the waters within the Canadian Arctic archipelago to be internal waters of Canada. In my humble opinion, rightly so. And through those waters, there is no right of passage in favor of foreign ships.
Professor Emeritus Donna Ferrand is considered the leading expert on legal issues in the Arctic and has written several books on the subject.
It doesn't mean that Canada is not going to let foreign ships through. On the contrary, the only thing Canada wants is foreign ships, particularly Americans, but any foreign ship, to ask permission.
Over at the US Embassy in Ottawa, Ambassador David Wilkins has a different view.
We're simply saying the Northwest Passage, if and when it's navigable, is a strait to be used for international navigation, pure and simple.
Now, you know that Canada argues it's not an international strait.
Well, we understand that, and we do not agree with Canadian claims that it's internal waters. But this really is not a dispute between the United States and Canada. This is a dispute between Canada and the world.
The other issue under dispute is the 1 million square kilometres of seabed under the Arctic Ocean near the North Pole, which is thought to contain large oil and gas reserves. Jurisdiction over the seabed is regulated by the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, ratified by Canada, Russia, Denmark and Norway, but not yet the US. Each nation hopes to prove that the seabed is an extension of its continental shelf. A recent Russian scientific expedition to the Arctic even sent a submarine to plant the Russian flag in the seabed, an exercise greeted with scorn by the other claimants.
Well, obviously it was a public relations effort by them, but it has no planting of a flag on a seabed, has no real legal effect and is not recognized to have any legal effect by any of the countries.
This is strictly symbolic. And the Russians themselves, the foreign minister just last week, the foreign minister of Russia said the purpose of going down 4,000, a little over 4,000 meters, was not to plant a flag and leave a message in a bottle. No. The main purpose was to determine and/or confirm that their continental shelf, geologically, goes right up to the North Pole.
I have a relationship with this view, a partnership. It protects me as I protect it. I come home and I exhale because this view is so beautiful and so strong and wise.
Nobel Peace Prize nominee Sheila Watt-Cloutier travels the world trying to protect the North and its people.
The Prime Minister has certainly been very vocal about protecting the sovereignty of the North, maintaining control in the region. Do you feel confident that that is more than just talk and that that could make a difference?
It's interesting that it takes Russia and other countries to come and start to claim the Arctic seabed as their own for our own government to take this kind of quick action. I'm hoping that it's genuine, it's authentic, and that they're going to do the right thing and work with the Inuit communities on ensuring that this is Canadian waters.
Only by travelling out across the archipelago do you get a sense of just how remote this disputed territory is. Far into the distance, nothing but ocean and islands. Observation posts are set up on uninhabited dots of land throughout the region, with rangers and other Canadian troops conducting surveillance, when they can. On this day, in this weather, it doesn't look like there's much here to fight over. But a scramble for mineral resources by rival nations could spiral into not so much a Cold War as a real one.
The worst case scenario is clearly one of a regional area where hostilities are the norm and cooperation are the exception.
Neighbours Canada and the US are holding firm to their opposing positions on the Northwest Passage. At recent talks between the country's leaders, both sides reiterated their stance.
Canada, as you know, is fully committed to strengthening its Arctic sovereignty on every level, not just military, but economic, social, environmental.
Yeah, we'll manage the differences because there are differences on the Northwest Passage. We believe it's an international passageway. Having said that, the United States does not question Canadian sovereignty over its Arctic islands, and the United States supports Canadian investments that have been made to exercise its sovereignty.
But many Canadians don't put much faith in the words. They believe there truly is a threat to the nation's control over its north, and that the current show of strength is vital and overdue.
If Canada does not develop the necessary control, effective control, over the waters which it claims to be hers and hers alone, then with the passing of time and with the increase of international maritime traffic, the Northwest Passage could become an international strait in the strict legal sense of the term, meaning that all ships, including warships and submarine, would have a right of passage. And that is not something which Canada should take lightly.
The Arctic nations plan a summit meeting next year to discuss the future of the region. In the meantime, it's fair to forecast frosty relations between the main stakeholders here at the top of the world.